Today we're going to look at congruent figures, and so in particular congruent polygons today. So congruent polygons must have all corresponding angles congruent and all corresponding sides congruent. So what I mean is, like, this is an example of two congruent figures, but not all the sides have to be the same and all the angles have to be the same in terms of, like, they're all 90 here and they're all 90 here. What I'm saying is all the angles on this shape have to match up with one of the angles on this shape. Same with the sides, and they have to be in the right order. So these are congruent figures, but let's look at a couple more examples here. So these look like they're congruent, or at least they're pretty close. We've got 36 degrees, 36 degrees, 66 degrees, 66 degrees, and 78 degrees, and 78 degrees. So while the angles do match up on these two shapes, that meets the first criteria, but the second criteria is all the sides have to be congruent. And I notice here that all these sides, 6, 7, and 10, are exactly half of these, 12, 14, and 20. However, they're not the same. So this would have to be 12, this would have to be 20, and this would have to be 14 for these to be congruent. So these are called similar, and that's a whole different, idea. That's a whole different chapter in our book. But these are not congruent because not all the corresponding sides are congruent. Okay, so let's look at the next one. This one says the two shapes above are congruent. It's telling you that they indeed are congruent. Now it's asking you to write an appropriate congruence statement. So what this means is if we look at this shape over here, we'll say this is A, B, C, D, E. So I'll just type that in, spare you my penmanship. So A, B, C, D, E. And we would say that is congruent to, and we have to write things in the correct order here. So if A is up here, then it goes across the double tick mark line, then we'd start at Z, and we'd end up at Y. So we're going to go in this order. We're going to go Z, Y, X. Shoot, that's not supposed to be an X. Let's turn that into a W. Okay, so it goes Z, Y, X, W, V. That's the order we would want to put them in. So let's type that in. Z, Y, X, oops, Z. Z, Y, X, W, V. Okay, and those are congruent, so we would write our little congruent symbol in here. So A, B, C, D, E is congruent to Z, Y, X, W, V. And they have to go in that order. Okay, and if we chose, instead of starting with A, maybe we start with B, we went B, C, D, E, A, then we would start with Y, Y, X, W, V, Z. Okay, two more here. This one, these are congruent. I'll just tell you that, and I want you to match them up. So maybe pause it and see if you can figure out which order these letters have to go in. Otherwise, I'll do that right now. So one of the things you can do is kind of manipulate the shapes, and you can take this shape and rotate it so that it lines up nicely with the other one. And so it looks like it'd be like that maybe. So it looks like the A is going to match up with the V, the E with the W, the D with the X, the C with the Y, and the B with the Z. Otherwise, you could measure the sides and then line them up that way. So A goes with V, B goes with Z, C goes with Y, D goes with X, and E goes with W. So the correct order here is V, Z, Y, X, W. And that's the one right way to write this congruent statement. So if we know this is true, then AB would be congruent to what side over here? So one of the tricks to this is if you're given a congruent statement, A, B, C, D, E is congruent to V, Z, Y, X, W, if it asks what AB is congruent to, you don't even have to look at the pictures, because A and B are the first two letters, so then AB would be congruent to VZ. They're the first two letters on the other picture. So then if I said angle YZV, angle YZV, so that's third, second, first letter, that'd be congruent to angle CBA. Okay, and then lastly, angle YWZ. So YWZ, that would go 3, 5, 2. That would be congruent to CEB, angle CEB. Okay, so that's the intro to congruent polygons.